As you can see, proceduralism is a pretty deep subject, and it's the kind of thing that's not mastered overnight. I hope this DVD though has given you the information you need to have a pretty solid grounding in this topic. This is not the end of the road by any means though, and we will return to this topic in another DVD to explore some of the other areas of proceduralism and node-based workflows. But just what have we learnt in this DVD? Well, we found out that most modern 3D software is built around the concept of nodes, and that nodes are linked together to form more complex objects, such as geometry, lights, cameras, helpers, and so on. We found out that these nodes are in reality small programs in their own right, and that these programs use values called parameters to store and manipulate the values that the program needs to function. The data for these parameters is either held within the program or node itself, or stored in other specialized nodes called controllers. This is done when the values they contain need to change over time. In other words, when those parameters are actually animated. We know that proceduralism is the chaining together of scene nodes to form simple machine-like setups where small changes to a single parameter can have large effects downstream from that node. This can help to both streamline our workflow by allowing small centralized changes to have scene-wide effects, or to achieve a particular result, such as rigging a character or mimicking a machine in some way. A procedural approach also allows us to experiment, with the ability to revert to an earlier form of a model or rig with no risks involved. We looked at how various 3D software approached the issues of building a user interface that allowed working with nodes to build scene objects and to build procedural systems. At one extreme we had Houdini, which uses a schematic node-based system to build highly procedural systems, but often very complex systems as well. You have Maya with its mixture of linear workflow and also node-based workflow. And you have 3ds Max's approach, which uses a more linear system in its stack, which offers a more straightforward approach to node manipulation. We'll see in the next DVD in this series, though, that we can also create a more node-based approach in 3ds Max, using various controller wiring methods and so on. We looked at how there are a number of base geometry types on which we can base our object's construction, that certain modifiers would automatically convert to a geometry type that it needed to function, and we also found out that we could use certain modifiers to convert between most of the various geometry types. And we also found out that we could use certain modifiers to convert between most of the various base geometry types in a more procedural manner. We had a look at the stack user interface itself and the various options we have there for adding modifiers, deleting modifiers, turning them off either totally or only in the viewport or only at render time. Also how we can easily reorder the stack using drag and drop, and also that we can copy modifiers to other scene objects or instance them either through drag and drop or via the stack's menus. We also looked a little at the modifiers themselves and how they are designed to allow us to modify various small aspects of our models, such as their topology, their UV mapping, their poly count, and so on. And as we saw earlier, there are also modifiers to allow us to change the base geometry types as well. Later, we learned about topological dependency and how the flow of data from one node to another can sometimes be very dependent on the node order used for that particular setup. Also, how in other cases the order didn't really matter a great deal. Finally, we also had a look at how we could use the features of a procedural workflow and the stack to try out various model experiments with a 3D model, and also how we could again use the stack and a limited selection of vertices being passed up to a morph modifier to fix problems we had accidentally created with our mesh earlier on whilst modeling. So, we've covered an awful lot of ground in this DVD, and I think what you have learned here will allow you both to understand the systems behind 3ds Max a little better, and also to gain an insight into how you can use its architecture to really help you to achieve your goals using a stack system. And we've gained an insight into how the whole underlying node structure can be used to wire together our objects to make them even more procedural and functional. In the next DVD in this series, we will delve further into some of the procedural issues that we've touched on this DVD, such as how to produce a more nodal workflow within 3ds Max using the various controller channel connection systems offered by the software. This will focus to some extent on wiring in the first half of the DVD, looking at instancing controllers and also using expression and script controllers. And in the second half of the DVD, we'll move on to have a look at a number of practical examples that range from intermediate to advanced in terms of their complexity. Each example will put into practice the principles learned in the 2 DVDs, and give you an even greater insight into the power of working procedurally. So, I hope you've enjoyed this introduction to proceduralism, and I hope to continue our exploration in our next DVD. I'll see you there.